standing outside a hostel in a small coastal town in Brazil, closing your eyes and listening to the music, following the sound of live music through little colonial streets, finding the samba party, watching the people smiling and dancing and interacting, joining in if you feel comfortable, like the feeling of the sand over the cobblestones as you're in your bare feet dancing around. And all the world is asking of you to do is show up.
Hello and welcome to One Words, the podcast about solo traveling. My name is Anya and I am your tour guide. My time in Thailand for now has come to an end, and whilst very sad about that, I am so happy about the friends I made here on this small island and the relationships that grew deeper because I spent more time in one place. One of the people I'm honored to call a friend here is Heather. After traveling a bunch, Heather decided to leave their country Canada, move abroad, and has lived for the last 4 years in Asia. From being a young backpacker with an urge to escape the restraints and borders of their Western upbringing, they grew into a person who now is more invested in sustainability and giving back to the community they live in. I very much enjoy talking to this thoughtful, reflective, intelligent person, and I hope you will enjoy following us into a deep conversation about core values, mental health, sustainability, and tattoos. Hi Heather, welcome to One Words. It's your first podcast, no?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're glad to have you here. Heather, what does traveling mean to you?
Traveling is an opportunity for adventure and exploration through touristic means.
Through touristic means?
Yes. Planes, trains, and automobiles. I guess some people go by foot or horse.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's also an opportunity to go.
Or bicycle.
Or bicycle.
Who am I to discriminate? All travel is valid travel.
Would you also say if you travel just to the next city, it would be traveling, like in your own country? Or do you have to go abroad?
No, you don't have to go abroad. I feel that travel is most associated with leisure and time off from, quote, regular life. For some people, that's a work life. For some people, that's distance from family or friends. Sometimes it's distance from home.
You did a lot of traveling in your young age.
Yes.
How did it start? Where did you go first? Like your first solo travel?
Well, my first solo travel was to Costa Rica. I think I had a layover in Panama, which I extended by a day or two on my way out. So I did go to 2 countries.
Why did you extend in Panama?
I think I just had an opportunity with the layover to make without a change in cost. Mm-hmm. And then I could explore for a short while. I think that made the most sense at the time.
Yeah. Why Costa Rica?
I was looking for affordable round-trip flights from Toronto, and North American flights are notoriously expensive, and flying south was cost-effective, so places like Mexico and Central America were within like a similar flight range cost, and Costa Rica is historically well developed for tourism, safe, environmentally well maintained, culturally friendly, so it seemed approachable and accessible.
How did you start, like, being, well, I imagine, I don't know, how old were you when you went to Costa Rica?
Maybe 19.
So, okay, very young.
Or 20.
Yeah, like...
I was 19. I was about to turn 20.
Okay. Well, 19 is a young age to start. I remember being 19. I probably wouldn't have gone to Costa Rica on my own. Mm-hmm. So how did you plan it, or was it more a spontaneous thing, or?
Well, I booked a hostel for 2 nights
because I was arriving at 10:30 at night. And so I wanted to have a place to arrive to, and at that hour there wouldn't have been buses, so I would have had to take a taxi. So I wanted to have a specific address. You would have to notify the hostel that you're, arriving late, so someone's going to be up to let you in, that type of thing. So I had booked a hostel ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And then I made a friend, and I followed them where they were going, and yeah, I didn't book the rest of the trip was not booked. I think it was 3 weeks, and I just hopped around, met people, went to places they recommended. Of course, I'd Googled. I didn't actively not take in information or seek out information. I did enough preparation for safety, for packing, these types of things. But I suppose as minimal planning as necessary. Mm-hmm. I suppose I was utilizing solo travel at that age for a level of freedom and escapism. So not knowing was very important. It was important to not know and to be open to opportunity.
Mm-hmm. But you always knew you would go back after 3 weeks. So you had a...
Yeah, I was a university student. Mm-hmm. So I had to go back for school. So I would leave the last day of my final exam for the season, and then I would skip the first week of school the next term.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And what was it like, Costa Rica? What do you remember from that trip? Was it fun?
Sure. I believe that as much exploration and escapism and adventure as travel may hold, your core values, your identity and who you are, your interests, they're only going to change by so many degrees. So it's important that whatever lifestyle, interests, values I have are sustainable and maintainable for, wherever I'm living or going or whatnot. So I wouldn't say I live that much a different life. I prioritized moving my body. I prioritized exploration on foot and through public transit. I am a very frugal person, so I was, trying to shop at local markets and cook all my meals at home. And I was, very much living within the same values that I held for my regular life. So it was fun, but in a very normal way. Mm-hmm. My travel didn't involve excess or that much outside of the norm of what I would choose to experience in life. Mm-hmm. Costa Rica is, I think, even all these years later, I think it still would hold up for the places I went are still popular tourist places. The public transit would be the same or better. The environmental consciousness would be the same or better. The safety would be the same or better. So I think if we were recommending that as a place to go, it is the most expensive country in Central America, but you're paying for sustainability, public transit, safety, tourist development, this type of thing. Mm-hmm. So you're paying for peace of mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and when you came back from this first solo trip, did something change in you? Did the trip change you?
I'd learned things. It was my first time trying to learn a language in the place where I was, and I hadn't been exposed to Spanish before. So I was, invested in learning what I could as a language and communicating with people who did not speak English as a first language. It was my first time being in a hostel and staying with often similar-minded or overlapping interest young people. I suppose the same could be said for a university. You're all there for similar interests, reasons, whatnot. But at the hostel, it's the sleeping and eating and living part of life that you're sharing together. And then maybe you also make friends and go do things together and adventure. So there's an exposure to people, international people who I would have otherwise not met, exposure to a culture I'd never experienced before, music and dance and an incredible abundance of nature, animals I'd never seen before, trees I'd never seen before, air I hadn't breathed before, humidity I hadn't felt before. So I think I took everything in sensorily, and, in memory and experience. But I'm not so sure that 3 weeks, in 3 weeks I had any type of profound shift in who I was as a person.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to pursue more of this, probably still with an element of escapism, but that's okay.
And you did more of this.
I did.
Where did you go? Like, you come from Canada, so it's...
Yeah, I come from a very large suburb outside of Toronto.
And Canada, for a lot of people in Europe, is a country where they strive to go on traveling and exploring and seeing the country, and not only Toronto or Vancouver, but the countryside and the freedom there. Which is very funny that you, as a Canadian, say, "Oh, I did escapism and I was looking for freedom outside of Canada."
Sure.
Yeah.
I think as a young person, the financial constraints, obviously, to have disposable income and be able to choose to spend it on travel is a remarkable level of privilege compared to most of the world. But I understood the value of $1. And that I could not live, even as, within the simple means that I choose to get by on, the quality of life and experience traveling in majority of the world compared to North America, the cost value is totally different. It costs so much to live in Canada, let alone travel in Canada. I would say a lot of people in Canada haven't got to travel within their own country because it is alarmingly expensive. It costs more to go by train than it would by plane, and the plane is, the airlines are quite monopolized, and the prices are outrageous, and the carbon cost, and everything is very far away. So even if you are going by car, factoring an extra 3 days of travel, putting that stress on a family member or friend to drive, the cost of gas. It's, the cost of a hotel for a basic hotel room at a Holiday Inn chain is going to be upwards of $200 a night just passing through a highway in Canada. And, you can spend that over multiple weeks in Central America, staying in hostels.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different tourist experience. And I from who I know, I would say most Canadians haven't got to experience the tourist side of Canada either, because it's not accessible to the majority of people or young people nowadays. Yeah.
You always have the feeling you can explore your own country anytime, so you don't do it. You want to go abroad if you go on holiday or traveling.
I'm sure most people would agree with that. I don't have anything if it was affordable too, I would have pursued more experiences within Canada. My parents are both from Europe, and they made a point when we were children, my sibling and I, they made a point to experience Canada with us because they also had not explored Canada. So my father had a work trip once a year, and we had the privilege of being able to take the whole family, and we would skip a week of school. So my parents are not adventurous type people. They're not outdoorsy at all, but they prioritize the self-actualized experience of exploring our own country. So as a child, I got to explore a lot of major cities and major areas in Canada, and they're very beautiful. But those experiences, even one of those experiences, would not have been affordable to me as a young adult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you went to Costa Rica, I guess the first year of university, 19, I don't know. It would be
second year, yeah.
And then you made a point in going abroad every year, like in the between terms, or?
Right. So I took school year round. So I had 3 of these potential breaks. So I didn't use all of them for that. I did go back to Costa Rica. I flew into Panama and flew out of Nicaragua maybe 9 months later, since my first time there.
Okay. Why did you go back?
Because it was an experience that I hadn't completed by any means. And as someone who's traveled more, I certainly don't travel places with the intention of having not done everything. Like this assumption that you're going to come back is a false assumption. Mm-hmm. Most of us are only going to have this singular experience with friends or partners or family members. This assumption that people are just going to always be there. This assumption that places are never going to change. This is not true. That's a psychological way of trying to feel in control over our lives. So I didn't travel in Costa Rica the first time with this idea of going back or with this feeling that I hadn't completed it per se, but I hadn't. Okay. I definitely didn't move as much as I thought I would. I stuck to my comfort zone a little bit more than was necessary. Mm-hmm. And by having an in and out flight in over 2 different land borders, it forced me to move at a very fast pace, mm-hmm. which is what I was looking for at the time. I wanted to keep moving. I wanted to enjoy the journey of land travel. I wanted to move my body and run and explore and go to the national parks. And I visited a few friends, a friend in Panama and a friend in Costa Rica. And it was a very meaningful trip. I would say it was optimized. It was optimized to my interests, to my output as a human, mm-hmm. How much I could move my body and exercise, how little money I could spend, how quickly I could get to where I was intending to go mm-hmm. with as little mistakes as possible because I was on a timeline. So it was a very optimized trip. I think that reflects the hustle culture that I was raised into. Mm-hmm. I think that reflects the pace of my mind as a young person, as a student. It reflects the output that I felt was expected of me as a human, mm-hmm. as an employee, as a student. So the pace of the trip reflected my inner world and where I came from. It's not something that could have been done for 4 months. Mm-hmm. It's a pace that was a 5-week pace. It was a sprint.
How did it match up with the culture there? I've never been to Middle America or South America, but I'd imagine being a warmer country, being a tropical country, the pace is slower and people are more relaxed and more like, oh, we see, go with the flow kind of thing. And then you coming with your energy and bam, 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 let's do this. I planned out everything. How did that match up?
Well, I planned nothing, but I just optimized where I was and when I was. Okay. And I think the key is that I wasn't applying the expectation or output or plan or action onto other people or to the culture that I was visiting. Mm-hmm. That because I was solo traveling, I could decide the parameters because it was only my lived experience. Having that type of pace doesn't mean that I expect a meal at a restaurant to be served quickly. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean, there's this balance, It doesn't mean you take the first car that answers to your hitchhike, right? Like, there's a lot of space to slow down in between, mm-hmm. and you're absolutely right. There often are more conscientious, calmer, but the fact that, we can take time to sit together as friends or family at the end of the day and share a meal, that we're taking time to cook our own food that is grown in the garden at the time that Mother Nature decides, mm-hmm. That we pause in the hottest part of the day and we take a siesta. And you feel these customs and practices and daily schedules. You try them out yourself. I'm sure lots of people could do with a siesta in the middle of their day and would be a little less pissy by the evening. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly room to interpret that, and there's no need for me as an outsider to apply mm-hmm. my output or expectations. So if I want to do that much, that means I'm waking up earlier and I'm not putting that on other people.
Mm-hmm. So what other countries did you visit? Was it always warmer countries? Like going south also because of the, how would you say, like money-wise? So it's more south, it's cheaper, or?
I did travel to Iceland with my best friend in university. That was a very short but wonderful trip. It was also much further outside of my budget than I would have spent on my own. I would not. There's no way I would have booked that flight on my own. And I have no regrets. And it's a once in a lifetime experience with a very dear friend, and I'll hold those memories close to my heart forever. And I remember the food we ate and the drives we took and the things we saw and the friends we made. And with hindsight, there's no way that the cost of the money would sour the memories. Pragmatically, I would never do it again. And I think that's just the influence of making decisions with another person. And when I'm traveling on my own, there isn't a need to compromise because I'm making those decisions for myself, by myself, with myself. So having the outcome with the expectations of what my experience will be like, how I fill my time, when I wake up in the day, what I'm doing, where I'm going, and how much money I spend is only up to me. So if I am disappointed in the outcome, it's because maybe I changed my expectations along the way. Maybe my expectations weren't realistic and I didn't do enough research. But the compromise that happens when you're doing that with another person, whether that's planning your life at home or whether that's traveling abroad, things are going to be different than if you were on your own, and that's just the reality.
You then also moved abroad, no? Why? And what made you move, and why did you choose this specific country, and how was it?
I chose to leave, and a lot of that comes from my own difficulty as a personality in settling. In, pausing is okay, stopping is not. And that's my own issues with pace and life decisions. But I chose to leave. I didn't choose to move abroad. What I was psychologically owning at the time was not the entire choice of, I'm choosing to move abroad. I did do that. But I didn't make that decision with the acceptance of what that really was.
Okay.
In my last term of university, I was signed up with a program that took over a year to complete. It involved taking multiple language courses on culture and empathy and international development and these types of things. And I had to do all of this work as a prerequisite to go on a voluntourism experience abroad as a representative of my university. And the interesting part about the program was you did not choose where you went. So they chose for you. And our cohort was uneven. So one person would be going on their own. And I had, as an introvert who likes to make decisions on my own, I had certainly recommended that I would be perfectly happy going on the experience by myself. And so I did go on my own. I was assigned to a project in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. And I suppose the program was supposed to be maybe about 12 weeks, about the length of a school term. And unfortunately, I was ill during that time due to some food intolerances that I have. I ended up requiring medical care at a hospital, and I was there for about 10 days. But on travel insurance and other insurances, in general, in places in the world where insurance is not built into social services and public services, there's a lot of limitations. So once you are, what is the verb when you're checked out of the hospital?
No, it's not released.
You're admitted into the hospital.
Yeah,
and you are
released? No? Is it released?
Released like a tiger into the wild.
I watch a lot of Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah,
I
sure.
should know that.
Yeah. There's a verb.
Yeah.
There's a verb.
Well, we know what we're talking about.
We didn't find the word, but we know what we're talking about, so hopefully...
You were thrown out of the hospital.
I was thrown out of the hospital. would be a much more interesting story. And you cannot be admitted under the same health insurance policy for the same issue.
Oh.
So, for example, if you had appendicitis abroad, it would be within your best interest to actually have your appendix removed, because if you had a flare-up 4 weeks later and had to have it removed, it wouldn't be covered by your insurance.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right.
Okay.
Always read the fine print. If once I was insert verb, we cannot remember, that I wouldn't be able to go back for follow-up care for this broad, expansive digestive issues that I was experiencing. And I tried to travel a bit more, and I wasn't able to without going to public health clinics for pain medication and fluids and this type of thing. So it was apparent that I had to go back to Canada for our lovely free healthcare policies, which, as long as you live in the country X months a year, I think it's 6 or 7, then you can maintain your public health care. So I went back. Emergency type, trying to get the next flight out as soon as I can type thing. Yeah, so it took 3 flights, and I was back in Toronto. I was picked up by friends and family, and I went back to, stay with friends and family and await the waiting times of a free healthcare program. So 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. It was, not ideal. As much as I was not a planner, my only desire was to stay away, and I did not succeed at staying away. But, that's the reality. It doesn't matter how well you take care of yourself. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your choices. We all are in need of and deserving of accessible health care. We are all in need of and deserving of shelter, of food, of clean drinking water, of personal safety and well-being, right? And, it's incredible that I could have the privilege to be away, afford a program that still covered my access to health care, in a country where the public health care, I'm not sure where it stands internationally. I don't think it's that bad, but I can assure you that the private hospital was nicer than any hostel I'd ever stayed in. It was like a hotel, and as an international person, you're treated very well. And not only could I get that type of care, but that I could afford and safely fly home, be accepted by friends or family, and the next day be accessing free healthcare back home. It's quite a special thing. Also, earlier, I have ADHD. Earlier, you asked me about cold and, warm countries and stuff.
Yeah.
It was 7 degrees in Iceland, or minus, something at the worst. And it was, 20 degrees colder in Toronto at the time in February. So, yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
That was the point.
You did choose
I traveled
warmer.
somewhere cold in winter in Canada.
Yeah.
But it was actually somewhere warmer on accident.
Oh.
Yes. You can edit that shit together. You're welcome. Anyways, that was the first time I moved abroad. I had left in a fashion where I wasn't paying rent at a student apartment. I didn't have a school term to come back to. That was the open-ended type trip.
What was the second time?
A year and a half later, I'd done, the healthcare I was waiting for. I resumed some of my previous jobs, and I got a new full-time job. I worked very hard, and I couch surfed with friends for a year and a half to save money, which allowed me to have money. I got laser corrective eye surgery before I left. That cost 8 months of rent that I didn't pay because I was couch surfing. So I was staying with friends and friends of friends who are understanding to my mental health needs at the time, my intention of leaving, where and how I was spending money when I was spending it. And all of those pieces allowed me to leave again, which I'm very lucky for. So I had a coworker at the time saying, I'm going to Asia. This is when I'm quitting, if you'd like to come with me. She knew I was looking for an exit strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So I took that opportunity to leave with her.
So it was at the time the couch surfing, the saving up money. It was always to get to the goal
Of leaving
again.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, again, this lack of settled that I feel as a person existing in the world, this opposition I have to this hyper-capitalist society that I was raised in, to have all this privilege and to use it in a way that wasn't meaningful to me seemed like such a waste.
Okay.
I'm capable of working hard. I have a very high work ethic. I really value my time. I value my impact on society. I want to work and apply myself in a way that feels meaningful to my interests or this bigger picture of my small role as an individual in a community or in a country. This idea of this very limited view of success in the West, of having a 9-to-5, of working in an office, of getting married, and having 2 children, and buying a house, and buying a bigger house, and buying another car, and buying a bigger car. This lifestyle creep that happens to a lot of adults. Having the education, getting to see this stuff from the outside, and knowing that I was like opposed to it with my core being. I use the privilege that I have to not participate in that and not work towards those goals because they weren't my goals and it's not my personal definition of success. And it's something that I am so opposed to that I'm very fearful of it. So there's certainly other ways to live in the West that doesn't align with that outline, but it's such a majority. It takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of learning, and it takes a lot of time, probably a lot of mistakes to create an alternative lifestyle back home, and the risk is a lot higher when the cost of living is so high, when, if you're living rurally, the weather is much more impactful than if you're in a major metropolitan area. So I think I have so much left to learn, and I had even more to learn at that age, that it was easier to leave. That the leaving through tourism, through solo travel, was accessible, budgetable, affordable, safe enough, temporary, because these are tourist visas. There are limited opportunities for young people to move abroad long term, namely student visas and work visas. Which already tells you that you're somewhere that wants you in some way, that you're contributing to their taxes, you're contributing to a labor force that is struggling in some way and requires international people. So, you don't just get to move where you want. That's not how the world works. Yeah. It's who needs you, where you can participate. But, moving abroad is complicated.
Yeah,
but leaving is easy.
Yeah, but do you think at the age you started traveling or when you experienced different countries, it was always with this goal to find a place where your living goals are met more easily? Or is it just in hindsight that you say, oh, that was what I was looking for? But at the time when I started traveling, it was more the young, I want to see the world, I want to explore, I want to check off those things, have the stamps in my passport thing.
I never wanted the stamps in my passport. Some people literally do travel like that, sparing judgment to them. What a waste of a passport that would be. Because the stamp doesn't denote the quality of an experience or the learning that is done. I could have traveled to a lot more countries in 5 weeks than 3. I am not interested in collecting anything from this world, material, and the stamp almost begins to feel like a material collection. I'm much more interested in the quality of interaction and experience of managing my impact, carbon-wise, consumer-wise, how I'm spending my money, where it's going, what type of industries I'm participating in. Yeah, this management of the experience. And I like to do, not so much see. It's more so about spending the time. And for me, that was the hiking and the parks and the walking and, getting tattoos and these things that involved time, these moments to slow down, this type of thing.
Did you also do like work away or pet sitting or something like that?
No, this was backpacking. So I was
okay.
moving quickly and I was floating. I was staying in places for 1 to 3 nights. The longest I'd stay somewhere would be 4 nights or so. I was doing all the activities that were movement-based in an area, and then I would move on. I was someone who was volunteering always back home. In Canada, when I was in high school, it was you couldn't graduate high school unless you'd done 40 hours of community service. It's not a lot. You can do 40 hours over a few weekends. It's the bare minimum. But it did plant the seed of what it means to find spaces in community where your skills or time are of value to other people or other groups or goals. So, as someone coming from a culture with privatized further education, so all of the colleges and universities in Canada are private and cost a lot of money. Not as much as the States, but most people are having to go into significant debt and take out very large loans, either under their family's name or their own names, in order to further their education, which, of course, nowadays is a necessity for the job market. I had the privilege of having that education paid for by my parents. And so there's this generational wealth that was being passed down onto me, that I didn't have to enter adulthood with debt, which is huge. So I saw that before it happened. So I had the foresight to be able to work during school. So I worked 3 to 5 part-time jobs while I was a student. It did compromise my mental health. It did compromise my grades. There's, a regular student just doing a school, there is compromise to personal well-being, to physical health, to social life, etc. You can't, fill all pieces of the pie. So by adding in this work, it was an investment for me to build my financial independence. I felt that financial independence would offer me the emotional freedom and space to make decisions under my own dollar as an adult. And I did spend some of that for travel because I was deeply mentally ill, struggling in a degree I never wanted. And there's only so many ways to cope, and most of them aren't that healthy. And I think the solo travel was a pretty darn healthy alternative to some other things I could have done. So I did want to backtrack because I think it's really important that that's talked about, because a lot of Europeans have free further education. North Americans, for the most part, do not. And the opportunity for scholarship and grants in Canada is not significant enough to cover the cost of school, so people are coming into very serious debt for their education. So knowing that I wasn't going to have that debt was a key part of my decision to work during school. And so I had built up enough savings to be able to leave. And there's an element of not being seen. There's an element of privacy when you're away from everyone you know. It can also be dangerous, right? Because people are choosing to share a version of themselves that may or may not be honest, or may or may not be true or safe. But how I chose to present and grow in the world was reflective of my values and my interests, was reflective of an openness to learn, to change, to grow. It was reflective of an underdeveloped brain. My prefrontal cortex only finished developing 1 or 2 years ago. I'm only 27 now. So I was traveling and exploring with a level of impulsion that's higher than a developed adult. The travel that I was embarking on was generally quite safe. Not that it would have been my fault had anything happened to me, but it was without a lot of high-risk behaviors. I wasn't consuming drugs or alcohol while I was abroad. I wasn't partying, wasn't, alone at night. I was going to say getting in cars with strange people, but that's exactly what hitchhiking is. I think the risks I took abroad were reasonable for the year and the political climate and where I was.
So, but I'm still...
Yeah, get me back on fucking track. I don't know where I am.
I'm still a little bit struggling in seeing... Well, the question would be, when you were abroad, as you said, not drinking alcohol, not going out at night, was this an expression of the person you wanted to be? Because you also said, I might be different when I'm abroad, because no one knows the me before, or my, 13-year-old self, or my 18-year-old self. I'm now 24 abroad, can be a totally different person. Was it a kind of trying different selves in different countries, or?
No, I think it was an opportunity to be honest with myself and true to who I was. It could definitely be used in this other way. It's a spectrum. You could pretend to be whoever, we have met plenty of people who say who they are, and then it's like, there's no one here to verify that this person is who there is. I've never met their parents. I don't know any of their friends. Like catfish abroad. Who the fuck are they? Just because someone says this is my name, that could not be their name. Like nothing could be true about what someone is presenting about themselves. You have nothing verifiable for that person that you're meeting internationally, right? So for sure, it could be misused in many, many ways. No, I think who I was when I was traveling is like going back to basics, like a very simplified version. You're eating, moving, living, taking care of your physical and mental self so that you can explore and go places and meet people and whatever. And, the amount of vulnerability needed to connect to people in very short periods of time. You don't have weeks to get to know someone. It's like you are at this hostel for a night, this demand socially to connect with people under this constraint of time can lead itself to really honest relationships with people, really beautiful friendships. And there's lots of people I met at hostels as a young person who I visited many years later. And I think that only happened because I was being a more raw, simplified version of myself. No one's counting. There's no one watching to see how many friends I make or don't make. There's no consequence. When I chose to be alone anyways, it doesn't matter if I connect with this person. It doesn't matter if they like me. There's no trophy at the end of this exchange. It's not who's the most popular at the hostel. That's not how that works, right?
Yeah.
So you either make that friend or you don't, and boo-hoo, you move on with your life, right? But there isn't this long-term implication of, I'm living in the city for 4 years, my work contract is 2 years long. Like, I really have to, be careful with how I present myself to my coworkers. I really want to, I don't really like that person right off the bat, but I'm going to put more time into it because we're going to be working together for the next year. So I think the interactions abroad are often either they're more superficial.
Yeah.
Because of this constraint of time, or what I kind of took for it is, this is a blip of who I am, how I spend my time. What can you give me of who you are and how you spend your time? Does this align in any way? And it could be something simple like getting the best book and movie recommendations I've ever had, of being, I ate there last night, you should go there, and now you're having, the best meal you've had in a week. Or I just came from that city and hiked that waterfall and it's really beautiful and I recommend you go there. Maybe that's superficial, but it's also an exchange of information, which can be really valuable to life experience or seeing the beauty of the world or choosing how to spend your time.
And as you said, because you don't have to engage in a longer relationship, it strips off the responsibility from yourself, and then you can say, that's me, deal with it or don't, because you can walk away. It's not like in a work environment where you have to deal with each other, so you might be more closed up, or I don't know. But also you could try out to be someone else just for fun. Because I think in the young age you don't know.
Good at that.
But you I don't think everyone really knows who they are or who they want to be. So it's an opportunity to try something out, because it's just like I stay there for 5 days, so I can be okay. I decide I have Spanish ancestors and I'm like flamenco professional, or something like that.
Baldwin's wife,
or something like that. I don't know.
She lied to the press for years about being Spanish, and
really?
She's not. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So people are doing that in the real world too.
Wow.
Well, it's just like social media, right? Like you can project any image of yourself that you desire, whether that's like a physical projection and aesthetic, a lifestyle that you are or not interested in, that you can or cannot afford, right? Like that's happening 24/7 online.
Yeah.
With people we know in real life, with people we've never met, with celebrity culture, with pop culture. There's always this idea of who am I choosing to present myself as to this audience.
Yeah.
And the like microcosm of connecting with people in real life, you know, stripped bare. Who are we to hide who we are? And you know, I'm only going to meet you for 2 days. Maybe you keep it superficial.
Yeah.
Maybe you make a new best friend.
Yeah. But then still, it's always a lot of times the same conversations. No, it's like, where are you from? What are you doing? Where are you going? Blah, blah, blah. So, yes, that's exhausting. And that.
But that's a superficial. Yeah. So it's like, how are you choosing to participate?
Yeah.
So I don't want to add to that. You know, we could continue the list of all the countries I've been to, and I don't think that's going to help anyone. And, you know, maybe it's okay just to tell a story, right? Maybe the goal is not to help anyone.
Yeah.
Right? But when I'm connecting with these people, when I'm making these friends, when I'm sharing knowledge, I want to provide something. Maybe we are superficial for the sake of entertainment, for the sake of fun, that type of stuff, and I don't think I'm very good at that. There's ways to connect on a deeper level in a short period of time, you know, by asking the right questions, by changing the narrative, by changing the direction of conversation. I don't want to hear about the last 10 places that person went, but like, what book are you reading? Like, teach me something. Like, stopping and listening to someone playing live music, learning a new dance, failing at something, right? There's lots that can be done with other people or with yourself to like engage that depth of connection and understanding and development.
Would you share an story or an experience you had which would like explain what you just said? Like, does there something comes to mind?
I don't think it has to be a big thing. I think it's all the little moments. It's like the cheesiness of like running outside when it's raining and dancing with your friends in the street. I can remember the faces of people who hitchhiked me places. You know, I remember an old man selling shrimp out of a cooler, and he had a Canadian flag pin on his hat at like the base of a mountain town in Costa Rica. And he like, you know, we had a very basic conversation in Spanish. But, like, he could connect to me because he had the Canadian pin on his hat that he got from a tourist at some point in his life. And this, like, very old man is having a normal conversation with me and just that's superficial, but it's the fact that I could communicate with someone outside of my own language and have that little brief moment of acknowledgement of, like, I see you as a human, and you see me as a human, and you're not trying to get my money, and I'm not trying to buy something from you, and I'm not trying to take from your culture, and you're not trying to harm me, and this basic respect and reciprocity and acknowledgement of our existence. And, like, these are the moments that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, but they're not profound, they're not deep, but they're not superficial either.
they're basic, but they're not superficial. The fact that someone would let you into their life, that someone would let you hold their child, that someone would tell you where they're from, that someone would want to know something about you, that we would trust someone to take us safely to where we're asking to go. It's those little moments of, I'm experiencing compassion. I'm experiencing trust. I am giving in honesty. I am open. I am sharing. I am loving. I am interested and curious. And those elements of who am I being? How am I interacting? How am I engaging in the world? Who am I giving myself as to other people?
Yeah, I don't think those memories or moments are basic. I think someone told me they read that all those little memories they put in kind of a safe, like in their head. So when they're old and or maybe sick, or when you can't move around anymore that easily, then you have this full box of memories, and which you can just open up and be like, oh, I experienced this and remember that, and still have all these memories, moments, experiences to keep you company in your old days and to make you happy. And like when you said the word compassion, in my mind, I have the picture of the goddess of compassion in India when I was standing in McLeod and watching. There was this shop and they had like this beautiful statue of this goddess with like 1,000 hands. I don't know. That's her. I think it's a she. Yeah, so those little flashes that come into mind. So I'm trying to get that out of your head. When you're explaining what you're seeing,
Yeah. Standing outside a hostel in a small coastal town in Brazil, closing your eyes and listening to the music, following the sound of live music through little colonial streets, finding the samba party, watching the people smiling and dancing and interacting, joining in if you feel comfortable, like the feeling of the sand over the cobblestones as you're in your bare feet dancing around. And all the world is asking of you to do is show up. That's it. It's not asking for your money. It's not asking for a consumer exchange. It's not asking for anything. It's just be here, be human, hear our music, feel the beat, feel your heart, participate as you're willing to participate, and we accept that, and we're happy you're here, and that's it.
I want to come back to your tattoos.
Okay.
To describe you a little bit for our listeners who don't see you.
Yes.
You have many tattoos. You mentioned it shortly before, that tattoos are important, also connecting to your travels. But how?
I like tattoos. I like the experience of getting tattoos. I like spending time with an artist. I like the reductionist experience of just being a canvas. I like the change in relationship to my body. It doesn't matter what it looks like or how it functions or whatever. But your skin is just becoming the canvas for somebody else's art. I like that it's a minimalist way to have things, because I don't like physical things, but the tattoos will just live and age on my body throughout my lifetime. And they're like a permanent act. Of course, they'll change with time. But so will I, so that's okay.
You like to be a canvas, so do you decide up front what's going on your body, like the image, or are you just like picking a tattoo artist and saying, okay, there's the spot, do whatever you want?
My approach to tattoos is picking an artist whose style and quality of the work I appreciate, and developing a relationship with them as their canvas where they can have an understanding to the shape, size, qualities of my body, where I have other art, what I have going on energetically and physically, where hopefully if it's a good experience, if the person who I think they are on Instagram and the person I present myself as align, then hopefully this is a connection that I'm continuing to revisit over time. Getting to see that person again and getting to collect more art from them again. So I pick an artist based off style and quality. I kind of present this. I'd really like to get, 3 to 4 tattoos over a day or two. Maybe there's a theme. Maybe there's a specific tattoo. Maybe I'm just picking from Flash. Maybe they're drawing stuff for me. Kind of changes with time. Maybe if it's the first time I'm seeing them versus the second time I'm seeing them. But I have a lot of artwork, but from fewer artists.
Okay.
Most of the artists I've worked with have given me more than one tattoo. Maybe 6 or more tattoos from the same person.
I think you once told me that you traveled to places where you can meet specific artists.
Yeah. I'm not very self-directed. I don't have a lot of motivation. I don't have a lot of life energy most of the time. And that gives me something I'm intrinsically motivated towards, but that's outside of myself and involves another person or place. So when I was traveling in Asia, I was shopping around on Instagram for a potential artist somewhere I was going or somewhere I was. If I didn't find the right person or have the right amount of time, there's never a force for it to happen. I'm not trying to collect a tattoo in every country. I'm not getting a tattoo that compromises my values of quality or experience or connection to the artist. But if it works out, it works out. And if I find someone great, maybe I will travel to visit them again. So I was leaving Indonesia for what was essentially a visa run because my tourist visa was up. And, I could have picked the same, a similar flight path for a similar price, and I chose one was to revisit an artist in Vietnam. An artist, I got work done in Indonesia, had moved back with their partner to Australia, and an artist from South Korea was in Australia at the time, so I was able to travel to the same city and visit both artists in the same week. So that's certainly, if there's any level of, collectivism and attachment to stuff, I definitely apply that towards tattoos.
So, but you didn't go to Australia just because of...
No, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
I pick a pet sit, make it work within my budget. I visited 3 friends while I was there, this type of idea, I fulfill the experience like I would any other experience with the intentions and values that I have and ways I spend my time and blah, blah, blah. But I did go there because both artists are going to be in the same city in the same month. And I was like, can I make that happen? And I did.
Oh,
yeah. So that is a little bit of a ticking of a box, if you will.
Okay.
But it ticks something in my brain as well. It's very satisfying.
So did you get your first tattoo in Canada or abroad?
Yeah, I already was getting tattoos in Canada. I had a few tattoo artists in Toronto. I have one artist who's done a lot of work on me. So, so I was already collecting art back then.
Okay. Going to Australia for a tattoo.
But not for a tattoo. For an experience with an artist.
Okay.
There's something, I hold a lot of regard for days spent getting tattoos. It's not because I am some masochist seeking out a painful experience. I do find it to be a positive psychological experience. There's something to be said for enduring physical pain, for meditation, the element of stillness. I don't have a still mind. I'm very restless. I have trouble turning off. I have trouble enjoying leisure and focusing under physical stillness. So this idea that I'm just sitting or laying in a chair all day or for hours at a time in other conditions is not something I would choose or easily participate in. But there's something very meditative for me about that experience. Obviously, sometimes there's positive conversation with the person, depends on the artist and how they like to work. Sometimes there's very little conversation, but it's such a strong sensory experience. I can remember the music that was playing while I was getting my last tattoo. I think of the colors on the wall and the art and objects that decorate the space, the architecture, the people around me also getting tattoos, the energy of the artists, this exchange of energy between me and the person who's drilling ink permanently into my skin. The healing process afterwards, the fact that I have to take care of myself for 14 days, keeping a wound clean and taken care of so that it heals well, that it heals optimally so that you don't get an infection. Yeah, this a level of research beforehand and the entire experience. I really do appreciate the entire experience of being tattooed.
Do you have a favorite tattoo?
Yeah, I just got my new favorite tattoo. My favorite tattoo is always changing.
Okay.
I have these 4 dangling kind of position skeletons on the back of my ribs and around my middle back. And it was from my artist's flash sheet. I think I have maybe 14 or 15 tattoos from this person. And I saw it. That's cute. I had said cute. Cute was the adjective of that day. I am not sure that cute is my favorite adjective in the world, but everything was cute that day. That one was cute. He hadn't done it before. It was waiting for somebody. He wanted to tattoo it on someone while he was in Bangkok, and that was great. Amazing. I'm going to get that. And you pick a size, find a place on the body, and and then it ended up being my favorite. But I didn't know it was my favorite until later. And then I catch a glimpse of it, cool. That's cool. And it has this positive memory and experience, and it's so intentional. You don't accidentally get ink drilled into your skin. It's such an intentional experience.
Do you have a tattoo you regret?
There are tattoos, and it's very quick. It's very instinctual. I'm like, oh, okay. But I let it sit, and then later I often feel more neutral about it later.
Okay.
I have very few goals with regards to long-term living, which also made it easier to travel as a young person because I wasn't planning on being here that long. And then I'm 27 now, so if I continue to, as I continue to live and exist in this body, which is, it's hard living in a body. Wow. There's a lot going on. It can be a very challenging experience to exist in this physical plane. And art on my body just makes that easier. And if I don't like it later, I'll cover it up. I plan on having a lot of tattoos. I see myself as someone with more tattoos than I have now. I feel that the more tattooed I am, the more the empty space stares back at me. So, in theory, I'll be decently covered with tattoos and can layer over things that I already have. Maybe things I don't love as much, and that's okay. There hasn't been anything where, I'm not who I was when I got that tattoo. I don't like it anymore. There hasn't been that. Maybe that's a little bit like being avoidant of trends and stuff, but I think that's impossible. The style of tattoos I have now didn't exist 10 years ago. So there's an element of trend there regardless. Yeah. But I think we all represent the generations that we collectively belong to, like pop culturally. We represent the space of education and politics and society that we were raised in. We dress ourselves and express ourselves probably in a way that was, revealed to us at some point in our youth or at different, marked life experiences. So we will always show our age through physical expression regardless. And if I show my age for a different time and a different, way of tattooing, in 10 or 20 years, and that's okay. And if I continue to get tattooed, then I will, my art will be evolving as tattooing evolves, as my interest and style evolves. Yeah.
I think this is the very first time someone told me something about tattoos that made me really want to have one. that's because growing up, I was surrounded by people tattooed a lot and tattoo artists and around me. I'm a lot surrounded by artists and stuff, so tattooed people. But I was always like, I don't know. I know I changed my mind about it, and I might hate it later. But the thing you said about it's hard. It's sometimes
burden.
hard.
That's the word I wanted. It's a burden living in a physical body.
Living in a physical body, and you make the physical body more pretty. Not pretty, but like more yourself. Like you.
Well, for those hours of getting a tattoo, and for the photo of the skin afterwards, I'm getting to exist for a different purpose, and the purpose of my body is so far outside of any other way you'd use it in the world.
Yeah.
Like there's very little overlap with other ways the body exists for.
Yeah.
And there's like the lack of control. You know, you can think you know how it'll turn out. You can think you know what it'll feel like, this type of thing, but there's no guarantee and there's no promise. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this relinquishing of control. And it's also the opposite of that. It's this taking control back over my body, especially as someone socialized as a girl, you know, by my second heterosexual relationship, you know, understanding that I had to ask my partner if I could get a piercing or a tattoo for my future self. Mm-hmm. Being able to say, well, I'm someone who knows I'm going to get tattoos in the future. So are you okay with that as my partner? Mm-hmm. As if that fucking mattered, and as if they had any right to have a say or control over my body. But we're so socialized, you know, by this world and by these politics that do control specifically female bodies and bodies of marginalized people. So this idea then as an adult, as a solo individual person on this planet, that, I can do whatever the fuck I want with my body. I'm not harming myself, and I'm not harming other people. Mm-hmm. So then there's nothing wrong with the pursuit of being tattooed. Mm-hmm. People do use tattoos for self-harm, and people can get images that harm other people, but I don't. So,
of course, but then
great.
People will always use things in every way.
Anything can be weaponized. Anything can be weaponized.
Yeah. Well. So, what would you say? Who are you now in, travel-wise? What would you say? How you're growing as a person? On which step on the ladder are you now around traveling? So you started as going very fast, places. Then we also had then you went to Asia, you lived abroad. So you took more time in one country or at one place.
Yeah.
Where are you now?
Well, other than a brief stint in Australia, I haven't left Asia. Mm-hmm. So I've been here for 4 years. And I did slow down by using pet sitting and work away, mostly pet sitting, so that I could stay for the duration of a tourist visa, mostly between 30 and 90 days, which is, is very, very generous and easy to travel on a Canadian passport. So the opportunities were very plentiful. Plentiful opportunity for travel. I am not interested in traveling. I'm not interested in participating in even the byproducts of mass tourism. Living here for so long in a local community and seeing the costs environmentally, seeing the costs on culture, seeing the amount of performativity that people have to project as a community, as a group, as an ethnicity, to satisfy this urge that foreigners have for seeing the other. And it's seeing how it's not changing people. Seeing these foreigners who keep coming back season after season and are not changing. they're not learning. They're not listening to these people. They're not listening to these communities. You know, it doesn't take a lot of research to see that the people of Hawaii do not want American or other tourists going there, to see how it's damaging a people, a place, an environment, a culture. And time again, the tourist industries are like disillusioned to their impact, and they're only interested in feeding their self-interest through experience and consumer and carbon. And my travel was never, you know, it could have been so many other things. And the only thing I regret is the carbon output, because, you know, I've intentionally not gone back and forth. And I've tried to stay within the region to move as little as possible, or to move as small lengths as possible. And I did move as little as possible with regards to like living out the tourist visas as long as was reasonable or extendable for the countries that I was in. But the reality is there are limits to this living abroad thing. There are limits to this digital nomad thing that people are doing. And I'm not interested in expending carbon in that way. There are pros and cons to lifestyle choices. Living rurally causes my environmental impact to raise because of the reliance on imported product for shipping costs, that everything is coming from off of our island, because this island is not able to produce for itself and its people because of agriculture and a lack of biodiversity from long-term tourism and other faults of industry. So I'm not interested in travel. I feel that the goals and values that I have for introspection, for education, for sustainability can be accessed and lived out in other ways. And it's about my net impact. And most of that throughout my life will be about slowing down over time, about education, about storytelling. And I need to be in one place in reality to invest in community, to invest in my development, to share myself with the world through story or conversation and connection, through love, through compassion, through empathy. So I don't see global travel being a part of my future. I've tried to minimize it as much as possible since I've left, despite leaving. The lifestyle that I would like to lead into my middle adulthood involves leaning a lot more heavily into sustainability, investing in the land, investing in farming, investing in the basics of, animal agriculture to support a local community, investing in community services and volunteering, all types of things that involve stability of location. I would also like to bring to light this, because of the Western direction of a work life and the heavy emphasis on a retirement. A lot of the people who are recurring or permanently living abroad are expats of a senior age range. And time again, I see and hear these stories of people going through physical health challenges, whether it's just because of a natural decline of health, whether it's like the accumulation of negative lifestyle over time, whether it's end-of-life care, and seeing the lack of resources, the taking of resources away from the healthcare systems of the country that they're in. At my age, it's easier to live under the illusion of, I don't need anyone. I'm doing this on my own. I'm living alone. I'm being alone. I'm happy in solitude, blah, blah, blah. And as we age, the impact of our independent skills is minimized no matter how much we try to retain. And I don't want to be another one of these aging people who are reliant more heavily on healthcare, are reliant on friends, family, and other supports. This idea that they can just live forever at 70 in a foreign country is not a reality. What happens when your spouse dies in a foreign country? What happens when you cannot fly because you're experiencing such an adverse health issue? Again, it can happen in any time and age, but I'm seeing and hearing these stories all the time of someone living abroad in Asia where there's a high expat population from the UK, from Europe, from Australia. And so it reaffirms for me this importance that even if during this time of exploration involves going abroad, involves a more normative travel experience, that it's going to come back to those values of community. For some people, that's family and friends, right? For some people, it's a community that they'll find when they're abroad. Maybe it's going back to what you already had and realizing what you already had. I don't know what that will look like for me, but I want to be able to invest in a community where I am a citizen or a permanent resident. I want to be paying tax towards a country that is able to provide me with public health care. I want to be able to work legally. I want to be able to take care of the people around me. I want the sense of security of being able to stay there long term. And most of the moving abroad idea as like a nomad, as a backpacker, is the disillusionment of that. And so I want to find a way to come back to that, because that's the long-term reality of the entire span of a human existence. And there's plenty of time between 27 and 65, but there's also these building blocks that need to be invested in order for me to be able to support the aging people around me, and for me to be supported as an aging person. And that will involve a level of permanency that might involve going back to where I'm from, or investing in a country where I can seek to gain those same, not rights. Some of them are rights. Some of them go beyond
Privileges.
The privileges of being a citizen or a permanent resident. Yeah.
So you would say, like the young need of escapism. Well, it sounds like it's gone now, because you now are on a stage where okay, I will grow old at some point. I will age, and my body will age, and I will need help.
Yeah.
So that changes.
And you can't expect, some people do, but it's unfair to expect of the world that you're just going to be taken care of. People will say about local communities that these are my family and these are my friends. They don't owe you anything. You don't have any entitlement from these people. And it's such an unfair expectation to, as a foreigner with a privileged foreign passport, with savings in a bank, with the access to a well-paid career your whole life, with healthcare, with physical mobility, blah, 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 to then go to a local community who's impoverished, who is working all day, every day to support friends or family, who's living in intergenerational homes, who doesn't have the same public services, who doesn't have the same access to healthcare, doesn't have the same access to education and opportunity, to then say that this culture is just going to have to take care of me because I have lived here long enough, because I have, whatever people feel like they've done to be entitled to that care. And it's not that this culture or community doesn't have the ability or compassion or interest, but systemically the resources are not there for their own communities to be taken care of, let alone for foreigners to be taken care of. And it forces other industries to come in. Why does Thailand have such a huge medical tourism and sex tourism industry? Like, these have been driven by decades of mass tourism from the West. And these industries are only helping the local people to a certain degree. They're creating their own microeconomies. They're creating job opportunities. But they're not encouraging then that government to invest in other ways, because, well, we didn't have to invest in education for women and girls because, well, they found their own ways to get jobs. That was because of meeting a need. It is not the peak of opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think getting to, look at the patterns of the generations of tourism that has come before me and seeing that impact, be like, oh, what is how I'm participating in an economy going to shift 20 years later? We're here for such a short time, but the impact can be hugely negative.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
It's like this balance between, I'm an insignificant being, and like my actions and behaviors have consequences on others and the world around me. But this focus on this, it's not about self-importance, but I know that my actions energetically, physically, monetarily participate in systems that are much bigger than I am and affect lives I'll never meet.
I'd like to finish off with 3 questions.
Okay.
So, what does being alone mean to you?
I like being alone. It is an opportunity for solitude, for me to introspect within myself of like, who am I? What are the thoughts that are coming out of my consciousness? Like, not interfering with the external world, like not being alone and on my computer or my phone with the internet. This idea of being alone with my thoughts, with presence, with what is around me, what sensory information I have, with my consciousness. Being alone is an opportunity.
What does being lonely mean to you?
Being lonely is a choice. Being lonely is a byproduct of many Western societies and many societies in general. Loneliness is a byproduct of city planning and design. Loneliness is a byproduct of non-intergenerational living. It's a byproduct of a work-centered, consumer-centered world. But we have opportunity to connect everywhere. There are people everywhere, and the number of people is just going up, 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 up. And there are people and groups who are more affected by loneliness, and it's not hard to seek them out if you're not a lonely person. Loneliness, in my experience, in my place in the world, in my privileges, is a choice. Loneliness is also an epidemic. It's harming a lot of the mental health of many people around the world, many cities, many groups. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And last question, what would you tell somebody who never traveled solo before?
It's not a necessary experience. It's a gift. If you want to go and the only thing holding you back is fear, there's enough information and resources, and education and information is what reduces anxiety. Practice is what allows us to acquire skills. Failure is the product of the attempt of that. So if fear is what is holding you back, then I don't think that's a very good answer. But it's not a necessary experience for anything that anyone has acquired or experienced from solo travel can be acquired in other ways. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts and your stories and for the doors you opened, in my mind at least.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening.
I hope you enjoyed your time listening to us. I think this episode specifically is one you can hear multiple times and still find a new angle and food for thought. Editing this episode, I felt so many times that Heather and I were walking a road with many forks left and right we could have taken, and sometimes did, and so many more topics we could have explored. If you are learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support me. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on both Spotify and Apple, where you have the opportunity to leave me up to a 5-star review. If you have questions or suggestions about topics and guests you'd like me to include on One Words, please put those in the comment section on YouTube or message me via Instagram. You'll find all the links to my social media in the show notes. Once again, thank you for listening, and as always, don't listen to us, go find out.